welcome to another episode of Tell Us More About That. Today we have a special guest.
We have my old therapist, Jamie. She's not old. She's
not
just
old.
a previous
There we go.
therapist of mine. And she is fantastic, and it was so fun to see her in this capacity. So Jamie's a licensed clinical professional counselor in Illinois, and she does work with clients in Illinois and Florida clinically. And she also recently started a new venture where she is working with couples and families through coaching. So two businesses that she's running right now, and she's a very busy woman. So we are very grateful to been able to catch her and get on a podcast with her.
Yeah, it was awesome. We covered the most of the podcast focused on talking about divorce, why couples tend to divorce, some things, and I guess strategies on how to maneuver challenging aspects of a relationship to keep the relationship healthy and intact and productive. But then also got into the impact divorce has on kids. And she talks about a bunch of the variables that come into play with those types of scenarios, short-term and long-term. And then we got into what I introduced as blended families, but that is apparently not the right term. So step families. Mm-hmm. So talked about, bringing two families together essentially, and the challenges that come along with that, and strategies to make it a more productive and happy process.
A lot of interesting perspectives that I hadn't considered previously.
Yeah, I mean, I think whether you experience this growing up or you've experienced it as an adult in some capacity, there was a lot of really good takeaways on this episode, and
Mm-hmm.
she was a lot of fun to talk to. So thank you for joining us, and enjoy
Jamie Simpkins.
Jamie Simpkins. All right. Welcome to another episode of Tell Us More About That. Today is a special day because we have a unique guest, or at least a unique connection that we were able to bring this guest on. Jen, what's special about this particular person?
Well, this is Jamie, and if you're in my circle at all, this is the Jamie that I've talked endlessly about. So Jamie was my therapist for many years, and it's been over a year, almost a year and a half, I think, since we've worked together in that capacity. So this is Jamie Simpkins, and I'm very excited to kind of reconnect in this way, in a very different way.
Yeah.
Jamie, if you want to share your background and kind of introduce yourself.
Yeah, it's so good to see you, and thank you for pointing out that it's been a year and a half. So any of the ethical nerds come after us.
What's the time limit on that? Does it have to be like a year and a half exactly?
A year is what's recommended according to the American Counseling Association, which is what I'm an LCPC, so that's what I'm held to. And it's just good, good boundaries and stuff. So thanks for pointing that out, Jen.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining, Jamie. Can you give us a little background as to, I guess, just introduce yourself for the audience?
Yes, I'm Jamie Simpkins. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor in Illinois and Florida. I have a private practice in Chicago. I've had that since 2015. And I also have a separate business, a coaching business, JLS Consulting, where I work with blended families. I'm a blended family consultant, and I focus mainly on working with stepmoms, so women who are in a relationship or married to a person with children. And I have a coaching program called Rebel Stepmoms Academy. So I do that separately, in addition to my private practice as a therapist. So I still maintain a full caseload of private clients where I specialize in working with adults.
Well, thank you. I don't know where you found time to squeeze us in, but thank you for making a little bit of window for us so we can chat.
Is the blended family stepmom, step-parent focus, is that something that you kind of fell into? Is it something you've had interest in?
Oh yeah, that's probably an important piece that I skipped over. I am a stepmom myself. I'm a repeat offender. So I was married and have 3 stepkids from my first marriage. And I have a partner now where he has two wonderful daughters. So all in all, I have 5 stepkids that range in age from 16 to 20, almost 25. But they were as young as 4, some of them when I first met them. So I like to say, if I haven't lived it all myself or seen it all myself, my clients have. And there ain't nothing that can turn this curly hair straight because you can't shock me. I've seen it all. And I knew what it was like being a young stepmom and seeing people going through divorce and like the effect on the kids and like being young, at the time myself and being like, this is wild, and reading the books and not feeling like they were that much help. So I basically created the program that I wish I had had because I got a lot of fluffy advice. And I was like, yeah, but how do you do that? Like, how do you focus on what you can control and let go of what you can't? Like, what does that actually look like? So I like doing that work.
That's awesome. And you have kind of the grown-up perspective of blended families, and I have like the child perspective of blended families. So I'm excited to kind of
me too
dive into that.
So for purposes of today, kind of wanted to focus it on 2 areas. Our cat is walking between the computer, so Lord knows what's going to happen. One time he actually shut everything off and we had to start all over. But focus on 2 areas of the more parent topic of divorce, and maybe 2 different ways to look at that too. Divorce on what you've seen from your experience of what are some of like the predictors of divorce and things that maybe couples could be aware of and conscious of to try to make sure that they're going in with their eyes wide open before getting married. And even if you're in a relationship or already married, like things you can be cognizant of. And then also the perspective of divorce on kids, like what you see and how that actually impacts them, short-term, long-term, that type of stuff. And then actually get into the conversation about what blended families are. I just learned what they were, I think yesterday. So, and what that looks like. So let's start with just divorce in general. I'm guessing like through your practice and what you've focused on. You've dealt with all sides of the spectrum within divorce, but what are some of the let's start with the couples first, I guess. What are some of the main causes that you've seen within couples that tends to lead to like just an unproductive marriage or an unproductive relationship and it breaks down?
Well, I like that you used the word unproductive instead of failed. Because I don't believe that any marriage that ends is a failure, so like, because like, where's the cutoff line? If we were married 10 years and it ends, I think that's quite successful. That sounds like a successful marriage to me. Is it only successful if they're married 50 years, but they're miserable the whole time? So I like that you use unproductive. So a marriage that ends in divorce, you really want to look at people, how they argue and how they, notice how I said how they argue, not if they argue, because yes, healthy couples do argue and it's very normal to argue and there's nothing wrong with you if you have arguments. So for anybody listening, I just want to clear that up today. I had to
start an argument.
So, but it's really how you argue can really be an indicator for like over time if you're headed for divorce or not, how you treat each other during an argument. Rather than, like the fact that you argue. So when we argue, we want to really focus on how we talk about the problem. The problem itself doesn't really matter as much, because 69% of the shit that we argue about, sorry if I'm swearing, is unsolvable. So you're not going to be able to solve most of the things you argue about. These things are just going to keep coming up, but you can change how you talk about that thing. Like, are you kind? Are you respectful? Are you open to influence from your partner? Those are big indicators of people who are going to make it if they're willing to accept influence and if they treat each other kindly, if they're willing to own their part and turn toward each other rather than away more often over time. And then if you have more positive interactions than negative interactions. So we want to have 5 positive interactions for every negative. And it really, like marriage, a good relationship is really made up of all those little tiny baby moments. those really matter.
I like that. So do you see more of people coming in and I guess it's a unique population, because if they're already talking to you, then there's some either hope that the marriage can work or be saved, or at least one of them wants that and the other one may be appeasing, or some combination of all of those things. But do you see more unproductive or unsuccessful relationships happen based on relational issues once they're inside the marriage, versus these like foundational disagreements that people just have and they're not able to come together? Like, you hear of people saying that it's not going to work because of how their opinion on having kids, and those things happened once they were married, or their opinion on religion or political topics. Is it less the big stuff and more just not able to really get the daily consistent parts of building a good relationship?
Yeah, definitely. It's more the little stuff. Very rarely do I see people come in because of a big issue like, I don't want to have kids and he does, or we don't agree on politics. It's the little stuff. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, we have been talking too about how people argue. Because I don't have a lot of experience with healthy conflict.
Most of us don't.
And Tony and his family tend to have a good relationship with
passionate people.
My
parents are from New Jersey. My mom's half Sicilian, half Irish.
Okay.
There's a lot.
Got it.
Jamie's like, got it.
Yes.
So figuring out how to have conflict as a couple has been challenging, and we've gotten a lot better at it over time. But I had to learn how to have healthy conflict.
Yeah.
And I think Tony had to learn that not all conflict can be passionate or intense, just because it's we're trying to balance it in that way. But I do remember kind of in the beginning stages, Jamie, when you and I were still seeing each other, I was like, well, I thought this was supposed to be easy. Like, this is a healthy relationship. And Jamie, you were like, oh, sweetie. The healthy ones are even more hard work. Yeah.
That's cute.
That's cute. And I was like, oh, shit.
Yeah. I like that that's where your response went to first, of like learning how to argue too. This is still a conversation that Jen and I have all the time. My personality, I tend to be, I'm very passionate about pretty much everything in my life that I focus my time on, and obviously my relationship being the most important. And when we do argue or when we disagree, I tend to be very blunt. I tend to just call things as they happen in a respectful way, but I don't shy around difficult topics. And with Jen's personality, that's really, with a lot of people's personality. So I've always been working on like trying to modify my approach so that I can be better received by those people. But the people that I respect are the ones usually that I'm more open with. So in the relationship, I will be very just honest, and sometimes honesty is received as criticism, and it's taken more personally. So being able to kind of like moderate the way that I'm giving my message so that she can receive it and we can have healthy conversation and dialogue around it. Yeah. That's been a learning process for sure, but definitely seen a lot of good results from it.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, Tony. That's exactly what I mean about accepting influence. So you know this about her, so changing your style. And that doesn't mean like changing your personality. Although I do say, in order to make, like when my couples come to me, and this is a quote I steal from Terry Real, who's my relationship therapist guru, that this work requires a personality transplant. You know, I had a client who's in his 70s, they're in couples coaching with me, and he's like, well, it's just not my nature to XYZ. And I said, that's the point. This is not natural. Some of the stuff doesn't come naturally. If you're used to being passionate, your nature is to be passionate, right? Yep. So you have to do things that are different. And, you know, Jen, for you to learn that his passion doesn't mean anything negative, or that the direct feedback could be just a result of being an East Coaster, which I get. I'm from the East Coast who lives in the Midwest, and it took me a while to really understand that beating around the bush way of talking that we just don't back east. You can say things directly. Yeah.
And you receive it differently also.
Yeah.
So
right.
If I pick up on any of the tap dancing, I get impatient with it. I'm like, will you just tell me what you're saying?
Yeah.
Like,
And I'm tap dancing in the
she's
corner,
tap
like,
dan-
I am.
Yeah, it's like going all over the place. Yeah, it's funny, but I really love the idea of your attention went directly to what most people would perceive as a negative thing, which is arguing. But that is kind of that's the make or break. Like, can you function and grow through difficult times and adversity?
And seeing arguments, every fight is an opportunity for deeper intimacy. Every fight is an opportunity for you to get closer.
I was thinking too, that repair piece, and I'm going to try to not generalize, but generationally, that repair piece has pretty regularly been missed.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like we are one of the newer generations to say, like, yeah, I messed, as a parent, say, like, I messed up. Like, you know, mom really lost her shit there. Let's come back and talk about it. Whereas, you know, growing up, it was more like my way or the highway. It was, yep, I did that. And I'm going to deal with that quietly. And I'm not going to show my child how to reconnect and how to repair. So I think that's more, I think your family probably showed that based on what you've shared, but.
Kind of. I think my parents fought, actually not a bunch, but the same thing. Like when they fought, my dad, not at all. My dad is not like the Jersey person that you like would generalize. My mom is everything you would generalize of a North Jersey, half Italian, half Irish woman. She is that. Okay. So my mom is very, very passionate. So my mom and my dad arguing growing up, there were a lot of, I don't have memories of it being like always this healthy, like positive resolution. But now that is definitely how it tends to sit, at least how I see it when they interact in that way. But they pretty much never argue now anymore. But it is an interesting kind of transition into the divorce topic, though, because if you have parents that are always fighting, and if your first line of feedback on a successful marriage is learn how to argue. So the ones that aren't and they end up getting divorced, they're arguing in this probably very toxic and unhealthy way in front of their kids, likely. So can you kind of talk a little bit about how that type of home environment, the constant fighting in an unhealthy, unproductive way, and then leading to divorce, like what do you see? How does that tend to represent itself on the kids that are observing that and kind of living it?
Not well, you know. And that's not to say like if we have a fight in front of our kids, they're ruined. No, kids need to see you disagreeing for sure. They need to see how adults disagree, and they need to see how they healthily repair and love each other afterward. But the toxic stuff that you're talking about, the toxic fights, the secular arguments that go nowhere, and the really like gross way of interacting with each other in front of the kids. I mean, it's traumatizing for kids to see their parents, you know, go through that. They're feeling that in their nervous systems, and it feels really unsafe and really scary and really yucky. They may not be able to articulate why, but they just know this does not feel good. Like they know it's toxic without knowing it's toxic, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like their bodies are telling them that something's wrong.
Is there any connection or research around where a kid who grows up in that environment, that they then seek that out? They seek that type, maybe not because they want that, but that's what they know.
Absolutely.
Familiar. Yeah.
There's mountains of data. There's mountains of research on that. I truly believe as a therapist, and this is how I do my work with couples in my coaching and therapy, that we unconsciously seek that out in an effort to try to heal it. Not because it's pleasant, but because from a neuroscience perspective, the brain will pick what is familiar over what's pleasant every time. And the brain reads what's familiar as love. So I might pick somebody that I fight with a lot because my parents did, because that feels like love in my house. But what you really want deep down is to heal that.
That's so interesting. One of our episodes with Chris Wilson, when he talks about abusive partners, I asked the question of there's a misconception that someone who is a victim, someone who's been abused, domestic abuse, physical, emotional, whatever the nature of the abuse may be, this misconception that those types of people tend to seek out people like that, people that will hurt them, people that will abuse them. And they find themselves in these situations time and time and time again. Yeah. And Chris talks about how he doesn't believe that nobody is seeking out pain. Nobody sees somebody and was like, yes, they will make me miserable. I want them. Yeah. But I like the way kind of the different perspective that you give on that of, they may not necessarily even be coding it all as pain.
No, they're not.
It's familiarity, and that's what they're labeling as love. That's interesting.
I hate it so much.
It's not conscious, No. And I remember saying to my own therapist a million years ago, like, well, I'm not walking around going, daddy issues. Let me find someone with my daddy issues.
Yeah.
But, it's underneath that, like deep down, that little girl inside of me, or however you want to conceptualize that, is trying to seek that out so I can heal it. So maybe this time it'll be different. Maybe this time it'll be better. Maybe this time we'll change it. Yeah. So that's how that looks.
Ugh, I hate that so much.
What do you, I'm sure this could be an episode in and of itself, but how do you even begin to rewire that? Like if it's unconscious, so they're not even really aware that that's what they're doing, you obviously point it out, and then they have to accept that this is why this is happening. But what is it that needs to be kind of rewritten for them to understand, okay, this is bad. What I need is actually this. How do you get people to change what they're not attracted to, but what they're seeking out?
Well, you have to be aware of it first. So change starts with awareness. I think they need to be made aware that this is their pattern. Like, this is what you're doing. That which we're aware of, we can focus on, and that which we can focus on, we can change. That's from the great Tom Brady and a lot of others.
Oh, no.
A lot of other people. But no, you have to be aware of it first. And then there's a number of different ways you can rewire, but I really believe in, like, you have to have the visceral lived experience, a corrective experience, like having the experience of someone being in it with you and giving you that corrective, like, no, I'm going to be here with you and we're going to have this fight, but I need you to act differently. I need you to speak to me differently, or I need this to look different. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And they need to be open to hearing that type of feedback. Yeah.
That's
interesting. Wow.
I feel like I'm back in session.
I know, John, what are you thinking?
Like, I've been here.
Okay. So you've got kids growing up in a tumultuous household. They're witnessing this unhealthy dynamic between their parents, and then it's obviously representing itself on to them, and it's impacting them probably at that age. But then longer term, what we're talking about here is even how it kind of codes how they seek out love and relationships when they get older, and they're building their own, trying to find their own way in life and everything else. So it's not necessarily the divorce, but it's the way the divorce came to be, and then the way things were handled after the fact. Okay.
Yes. And yes, divorce is a bummer for kids, but really what the research has shown is how the parents handle the divorce. Okay. Is what has an effect on the kids.
So what have you seen that is a healthy way to like, what are some things that parents can be aware of so they can try to, make this as not positive, but I guess neutral of an experience for the kid as possible.
Right. And, it's not going to be neutral. I'm not to say, like, because I think you're going to create another problem. If you're like, this is okay, this is great. It's not. Yeah. It sucks. It's sad. They want their mom and dad back together.
You get 2 new mommies.
Right. Yeah. 2 Christmases. Yeah. But there are some things you can do to mitigate that. And the number one thing is to try to not be, hostile toward each other. Try to treat each other kindly. Don't talk shit about the other one. And most people are like, yeah, I can do that. That's fine. That's obvious. But you have to check your body language. You have to check your eye rolls. Your kids see you go like that when you're talking about their dad. You know what I mean? Like, they sense you stiffen when, mom does this or that. And again, we're not going to be perfect, but you really do have to kind of watch that kind of stuff. So having it not be scorched earth is really helpful, for the kids. And I guess just like being open and honest, naming it like, this is sad. This is hard. Like, what you're feeling is real. This is a real thing. you're not crazy, and just like naming it, like calling it out, right? And then letting them know that it is not their fault. There's nothing they can do, and it's not their job to comfort me if you see me upset. That's why I have a therapist. That's why I have lawyers to help me, and a coach, or however you want to say it. Mom and daddy may have some moments of being sad, but that doesn't mean that it's your job to help me with that.
That one's important.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Personally.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, feeling like, I mean, I haven't experienced it, but what talking to Jen, like the feeling of needing to grow up a lot faster than you should have, and needing to parent your parents and comfort your parents instead of them comforting you. I'm sure that's difficult.
I do think maybe this is hopeful, but I do hope that we are raising new generations of more emotionally intelligent and more emotionally aware kids into adulthood. And, therapy is so less taboo than it used to be. And I think people a majority of people want to live a healthier, happier, more settled life. And so ideally, as you're going through a divorce, you have the lawyer and you have the therapist.
Yeah.
And the adults are getting the help that they need from their own support system, rather than leaning into their kids or their household to do that for them.
Right.
It is really interesting to shift I have my own perspective as a child of divorced parents to now consider, and I've been working on it too, of considering like my parents when they were going through that. And rather than, being angry with them for how they handled it, trying to not take away their role or responsibility of it, but like try to understand who they were when it was happening as an adult now. And I can manage that now as an adult. As a child, that was something I was trying to do. That wasn't my job, but it is kind of hurtful for me to think about like my parents going through that now as an adult, and kind of what that was like for them. And so I'm excited to talk about like the adult perspective of this too, of like what it's like to go through it as an adult with children, or even without kids, and just like what that is like. I only know it from my own perspective, so it's interesting to learn more about it from the adults that are going through it.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like, I know not all of the time, but I feel like a lot of times when things like this happen and there's kids involved, it seems to be where something happened. So like infidelity, or there was something that pits one of the spouses against the other, and it vilifies one of them. And so then it becomes this me versus them thing, and kind of bringing the kid onto one side and trying to pit him against the other parent, and like this whole dynamic. So it's got to be really, really, really difficult to have something like that happen just in your relationship. So your reality is totally shattered now, but being able to kind of cope with what happened and grow through that and understand it and process it on your own as an individual, process now what this means for you in your life, and then also not put this or have this affect your kids. Like that's a tall order for anyone.
It is. But that's what being an adult is doing hard things and hiring the right people to help you through that. And even if it is, an infidelity or something, like somebody stole something or something, you have to put on, and I would never say it to my client this way, but you have to put on your big boy and big girl pants and preserve the relationship that their child has with their parent. They deserve to still have a good, close relationship with their parent, despite the infidelity or whatever it is that happened. And it's hard. It is so hard. And you just want to be like, oh, if you only knew, I wish, oh, your father sucks. Or, would you hear what you did to me? That's not, you just can't. You gotta get into therapy and make sure you're not doing that, and get a real good poker face.
Yeah. That's nuts. And Jamie, just from your disclosure of your own personal experiences with being a stepmom many years ago to in one relationship and now in another relationship, I mean, from a step parent's perspective, what is that like stepping in to a relationship?
Nice transition.
Yeah, thanks. I thought so too.
It is, and you will hear every stepmom say this, the number one hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It
I
is
can
not
only
easy.
imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you come into this sort of family where they have their own culture, their own rules, things are kind of already being done one way, and you're kind of like, okay, but I also have a life, and I also have a say, and I don't agree with some of these things, and it's my home too. And then if the your partner and his ex don't get along, it affects you, and you see how it's affecting their children, and you're like, what are you doing? And you have to, really be good at restraining yourself. So, yeah, but it's also really rewarding, right? Also wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for just a general definition, can you kind of explain what the term blended family means?
Yeah. I don't personally like that term, and I try not to use it. I use the clinical term, which is step family, because I think blended family presupposes that we blend, or that we're supposed to blend, and not every family can or should blend.
Yeah.
Like, what does blending even mean? But so step family. So, you marry somebody with kids, or you have your own kids and you marry someone else with kids, or, and today we're using blended family to even mean other things like adoption and stuff too. So that's why I don't love that term, but I use step family. So you're marrying or getting into a relationship with someone with kids.
Yeah. Just call it what it is.
Yeah. Like the Brady Bunch kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're adding an addition onto your house, and you're putting 12 people into one home.
You leave my father out of this. But I like that too, because that gives this pressure of blending.
Yeah.
Of assimilating, of becoming one, where you are showing up with different systems and cultures and expectations.
So you have I think most of us likely have a skewed perception as to what this actually involves if you haven't lived through it. So myself being, God, Charlie just jumped on the back of the chair and it like rocked it all the way back. So as someone who works directly with stepmothers specifically, is that the focus? Okay.
Yeah, although I do work with the entire family. It starts with the stepmom, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's start with the hard stuff first. What are some of the most common challenges that you see that women tend to experience at the onset, like walking into this new family that they're now, all of a sudden a part of?
The number one thing I see from my own data, so polling my audience and reading the research, the biggest problem most women have, or people who come into these relationships, is they call it different parenting styles, which really means this is not to gender generalize, but the dad or the other parent tends to be really permissive because of guilt about the divorce. And so lets things go, or doesn't follow up or give consequences, and doesn't stick up for the stepmom or present a united front. And I believe that this is not my quote. This is from Wednesday Martin, the author of Step Monster, but she believes, and I believe this too, that stepmotherhood is one of the last kind of strongholds of misogyny. So I believe stepmotherhood is actually a feminist issue as well, because of gender norms like mental load. The woman handles the family, and so it's just on the stepmom to like blend and like make everybody get along. And but the truth is, I tell the dads, I say, like, because it's usually men, you're a linchpin. We need you. We cannot blend without you. And what that means is you making a concerted, anticipatory, proactive effort to step in and go, this is my partner. She matters. And this, she's important to our family. Saying that early and often, and not in like a dictatorial way or like, hey kids, pay attention, but it's like, hey, she's here too. She matters. And kind of approaching it that way.
And as most men tend to do, I'm sure they fuck that up more often than they should by not doing it in a genuine way. So overstepping and like I feel like you see, at least in media, you see this portrayal of like the dad just totally alienating his kids' needs now and just saying whatever, she says goes, whatever she wants is the rule. And I'm sure that's not the right way to do it either. But
it's almost like two extremes. They
Right.
like either one fall, the stepmom or the other parent their needs fall completely to the side, or we are permissive to the kids.
Yeah.
So they don't know how to balance that.
Right.
Do you think that's a Midwestern thing in general, or do you think that's like across the board?
No, it's across the board.
Okay.
Because I have clients in Japan and Canada and, England. And I mean, it's...
what time do you wake up to talk to your
Well, no, they're the ones doing the weird hours, not me.
Oh, okay. They're up at 3 a.m. talking to Jamie.
So parenting styles is the biggest obstacle. What are some of the other challenges that you see women tend to have in this role?
So the next would be like the biomom, the relationship with biomom, her decisions or like things that are being done in the other home. I have a specialization where I work with high conflict, the people who have a high conflict biomom. So high conflict personality, they're probably also some borderline or like personality disorder stuff that goes along with that. So there's more conflict. They're more committed to conflict above anything else. Like everything is a fight. From is Jimmy going to be in soccer to, those socks were supposed to come back to our house and you left them there. And it's, like everything is a fight. So working, having like a high conflict biomom or trying to get along with that other parent in that other house is another big struggle. And I would say probably then the stepkids, like stepmoms, I think don't know what their role should be. And I often think stepmoms do too much. They come in and try to be like a mom, or they come in and try to be a parent. And I try to say, focus on connection rather than correction, and that you should wait years before you even try to correct or discipline your stepkids, if at all. But I think a lot of women come in like I did and just like, no, it'll be different for me. I'm like a good person and like kids love me. And that was a rude awakening.
Yeah, well, that goes back to presenting that united front with the bio parent of kind of prioritizing that partnership and saying like, I don't feel comfortable correcting. So how can you or we do this together rather than you taking on kind of the bad guy persona of the house? Yep.
I'd imagine there's some situational variables there that can make it really difficult too. Like the nature of how, let's use the stepmom example still, of why the dad and the bio mom split. And if this woman had anything to do with that split, and now she's being formally brought into the mix, like I bet there's some very, very, very sensitive, difficult, kind of assimilation scenarios there.
Yeah,
that can make it really, really hard.
Yeah.
So, what would you recommend then for someone who's in this position? Like, how would someone go about learning how to do this and practicing?
How to be a stepmom?
Yeah.
Well, they could look at my website, rebelstepmom.com.
That's a little plug. I like that.
But I do say, education is one of the, I say there's 7 essential keys to blending a family, if you want to use that word. And one of them is education. So like educating yourself, whether it be getting a self-help book or working with a coach or a therapist. And I really want to caution people to make sure if you're going to work with a therapist, make sure they have blended family experience and are trained in blended family dynamics or are a step parent themselves, because I worked with a therapist when I was a young stepmom, and it actually did more harm than good because their advice was really, really harmful and not helpful. And well-meaning, but it just was not great. So make sure you vet your provider.
Interesting.
I love that. And the 7 steps, I do love that. That's not too many. It's not too little. But education, yes. I'm going to generalize again. Again, from my personal experience as a child of step families, we'll say, adults historically fell in love, and then they got married, and then they were like, oh shit, there's 4 kids here, and I've got 2 of my own or 4 of my own, and well, let's just figure it out along the way rather than having conversations, hard conversations with your partner or with the whole family if, age is appropriate. Like, I think historically people just did it and hoped for the best.
Yeah.
So I really like the idea of education, one step past awareness and is talking about it and so being solution focused and educating. And I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah. I think like that's such a good point, Jen. And like, that's never going to work. And for anybody listening, if you're going into marrying a person with kids, have a plan. You cannot build an airplane while flying it or fly it while building it. This won't work. Like, you have to have a plan, and it starts with like burning down your preconceived notions, sitting down with your partner and going, what like preconceived notions did we have about step family life? Because maybe the dad's like, oh, the kids are going to love you and it's going to be great. And they're just, I'm great with kids. All kids love me. So it will be fine. But that's probably not going to serve you. That's not realistic. And I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but it really just going into it with the rose-colored glasses off and realizing that this is a very complex situation and it's going to be bumpy at first. It is always bumpy. Even when it's good, it's complicated. So to just go in with a plan, I cannot stress that enough.
Yeah.
I like that, and a collaborated plan. So
Yes.
I feel like a lot of times people go sideways because misaligned expectations, because they just never effectively communicated them. So in this situation, I'm sure that's no different. I like that idea also of not just assuming because you're good with kids, or not just assuming because when you were dating this person and the one-off times that you saw their kids that it wasn't this like blow up situation, you seem to get along. That doesn't always directly translate into that's how it's going to be when you move in and you become actually a part of the family.
Exactly.
So yeah, going in with this kind of expectation of relearning how this is going to work and doing it together and being patient and I love that.
And maintaining, bringing in like the feminist perspective of it too, of maintaining your own identity and being confident in who you are, and then also like flexing or being flexible where you need to be within this new role, and how do you show up in this role. And I mean, that's so confusing.
Yeah. Well, that's why it can be helpful to work with, someone who can help guide you through that.
Yeah.
So in my program, we talk about my 5 pillars are: you have to have the right mindset, right role or expectations, because the role you want may not be the role that actually works. You have to have the right emotional regulation techniques, because you're going to get triggered. Step family life is triggering. There's something every single day that goes wrong. It's just more complex than regular family. The right conversation, so knowing how to communicate, so communication skills, and then the right balance. You cannot have being a step parent be your identity. There has to be more to your life than being a stepmom or a stepdad, or else. Yeah. And that goes for like bio moms and bio dads. Like, being a parent can't be your whole identity, or else that's going to bite you in the butt later down the road.
Yeah. Those are fantastic.
Yeah, I like that. Maintaining your kind of individual identity and working into the role of a stepmom as a role rather than as like who you are entirely. That's good.
Like with many roles.
So we're going to wrap up here in a second, but I'm interested with the age differences, because I'd imagine with kids that is certainly one of the most challenging variables that tends to be on the table. So if you're marrying someone who has older kids, so let's say they're like not in the house anymore, I feel like that's maybe like an under discussed challenge or difficulty that people have, because you'd probably still want these kids to accept you into the family, but it's that maybe you see them twice a year. So do you see unique challenges in those types of relationships?
Absolutely. That's a great question too, because I think people think it's probably easier, and it's no easier. Sometimes it's harder because they're older, so they're just set in their ways and used to things being a certain way. Or maybe like some of my clients who marry, they're older, so their stepkids are maybe in their 20s or 30s. well, maybe that daughter was used to being her dad's kind of caretaker, like we call it the little wife syndrome, where it's like, well,
Ew, I
now
had
who's this chick
that.
coming in?
Yes, you do.
What'd you say?
I said, ew, I had that.
Oh, you did. Well, it's
Gross.
that's not your fault. That's,
I
you know,
know.
the victim of your
Blame it on there.
circumstances.
Yeah.
But, you know, so this,
the little wife syndrome.
yeah. But, you know, like grown kids can, you know, be like, what are you doing coming in here? Like, what's going on? We've been doing things a certain way. Or like stepmom or dad may want to be like, let's all be a happy family. And you're right. You're like, dude, we see each other like twice a year. We don't need to do this. Like,
Yeah.
it's okay. And I'm down for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I say this because I don't think, well, my dad doesn't listen to podcasts, so he won't. Well, I don't know. I told him we were going to talk about him on this one, but, so I was thinking when you asked that question, which was a great question, was we are all adults now, me and my siblings, and my dad has been remarried with 4 kids and then separated from that family as well. And so like we've been through the step family and the blend attempts. And this is it's a unique situation where we've done it. So we're like, whatever, just come in. And I think that's great. But I can imagine it's not always like that. There's resentment. And I see this in some of my siblings too, of kind of like pushback of like, dad's doing this again. And I'm like, just let him live, whatever, do your own thing.
Yeah.
So I can imagine, and it's different just based on age and their own life experience too.
Yeah, that's true. So with my first marriage, my one daughter was 4. She thought this was great. She's like, I love it. This is great. Like a second mom. Like she was like, sweet. Then I think her siblings struggled a little bit more and they were like 11. And my partner now, his daughters they're, 19 and 16. They've been amazing. Like they were just like, cool, like whatever, come on in, like do you, you know what I mean? Like we like seeing our dad happy, so.
Yeah. That is such a simple point, but I think it's the most overlooked one is like the communication piece is the most critical thing here. Making sure everybody's communicated with, you're respecting everybody's boundaries and their needs and all of those things. That's very, very essential. But then at the end of the day, with older kids especially, let your mom be happy. Let your dad be happy. Like put your own like petty nonsense aside. And if your dad is truly, who cares if this is his 4th wife, 5th wife, or your mom's like 6th husband, whatever it is, if it's not hurting or harming you, and this person is not toxic to her and she's just happy or he's happy, these comparisons are not fair. But this is what came up in my head. When my parents were originally looking to sell the house that we have a lot of memories in as kids, and we didn't necessarily grow up there, but we spent like a lot of our formative years there. I remember I was in college and I remember feeling like angry towards my parents, like legitimately upset. Like, why would you sell this house? And all I was thinking about was me. I love going back there. We have all these memories there. But if you looked at it on paper, objectively, it made so much sense for them to get rid of it, for them to do what they wanted to do and move. Like, it's their life. So with your dad or with your mom or whatever it is, it's their life. Accept this person as much as you can, and if they're happy, let them be happy.
Well, and yes, developmentally, I think that's like a big piece of how old you are and like how you can separate. But the onus there, we're talking about adult children now, because developmentally they I shouldn't should myself, right? They could be developmentally aware, but it's a them. I'm going to say this harshly, but it's a them problem. Like if I'm trying to correct my dad's choices and who he's dating, or my mom's choices and who she's dating or married to, like that's a me problem. That is me trying to emotionally regulate or make decisions for or support this adult person, rather than taking my own role out of it that I, was maybe placed into unwillingly, but I, as the supporter, now I don't have to be that person and I shouldn't be that person. And these are adult people that it is their job to take care of themselves and their job to make decisions for themselves. And it can be the fucking wrong choice. And that is their job too, right? Like, so these children, because they're adults, these adult children, having a hard time with it, like release release yourself of that role. And I think that's hard because that's been a part of their identity for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Well, now you're talking codependence, and that's a whole other podcast,
Oh,
baby.
God. We'll be here for another hour.
Yeah.
It's my other favorite topic.
I love this.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of complications and challenges, it sounds like, with not just with a marriage and doing it right and learning how to live with each other and grow with each other and argue with each other and all the good stuff, but then also if it doesn't work, and that's reality sometimes too, it doesn't always work, learning ways to end it in a healthy way with having the least amount of negative impact on everybody that's involved is really important. So
if I could add to that with just the step family piece, you asked early in the session what makes for a successful marriage. I will say in step families, it's really important that the couple prioritize their marriage and really make it number one. And I think this goes for other families, traditional families too. Your marriage has to be number one. It has to be over the kids, the most important thing. I like to say our marriage or our relationship is our first priority, and the kids are our first responsibility. Because if you have a happy marriage, it will trickle down to the children. Even if you're remarried or repartnered and you're in a step situation, those kids need to see a successful, happy relationship. And you have a chance to model that for them, but you have to put each other first. And the kids need to see, even though it's uncomfortable, dad loving on stepmom, or like they need to see what prioritizing the relationship looks like. And, maybe everything doesn't need to drop when the kids come, that we can have a little bit of both. So it's just a caveat I wanted to add.
I love that. And that needs to be communicated to the kids too. Because I feel like I've even seen this with your family a little bit of, sometimes I think there can be maybe a little bit of like resentment towards the parents if they're not getting that attention from their parent and they're seeing it then redirected into this new person. So without the communication expectations, that I'm sure that could cause even more problems.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We've talked about this a lot today, but it's the Midwest. We don't talk about things, right? The
Maybe
tiptoe.
that is what it is. Yeah.
But that becomes even harder when you do try to incorporate other people and blend a situation. But yes, and Tony and I were talking last night, kind of putting together our outline for you today. And I had made that comment of like, I feel like it's shifting in this way where traditional families and step or blended families, like we are prioritizing our relationship over all things and how we communicate and how we treat one another. And I love this is our priority and our kids are our first responsibility. Because I'm responsible for myself, you're responsible for yourself, we are responsible for the kids. And we are responsible for prioritizing our united partnership in front.
Yes. I love that.
That's a great point.
All right. So if anyone wanted to learn more about you and get in touch with you, learn more about your coaching, any of your work that you've gotten into today, what would be the best way for them to track you down?
Yeah. You can find me at rebelstepmom.com or at rebelstepmom on IG. Therapy-wise, I'm not taking new clients, so sorry.
Can I come back? Take me
Rebel
back.
Stepmom. Okay, cool. We'll put that in the notes and have a link to your Instagram account also. So, well, thank you so much for your time. This was awesome.
Yeah, it was so good to be here. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Tell Us More About That. Don't forget to subscribe on whatever platform it is that you're listening to us on, and also leave us a rating and review.
If you have any topics you would like us to consider, if you have any feedback or commentary, only if it's positive, please visit www.tellusmoreaboutthat.com.
Thanks again for joining in, and we will see you next time.
See ya.